Richard Widmark wasn't just another actor. He was a true icon of classic Hollywood whose powerful performances helped define cinema's golden age. Behind the fame, however, was a man who faced many struggles along the way. His journey from a small town in Minnesota to the bright lights of Hollywood was anything but easy. If you don't know what Richard Widmark went through to find success, you're in the right place. My name is Mr. Heyman, and today we're talking about Richard Widmark and the 5 actors he reportedly hated most. So if you're a fan of Widmark or love old Western movies, don't forget to subscribe. Widmark was born in Sunrise, Minnesota, but his family moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota only a year later, where his father, Carl Henry Widmark, took a job as a traveling salesman. His mother, Ethel May, gave birth to his younger brother, Donald, on July 25, 1918, and the two boys remained close throughout their lives. Widmark credited his love for movies to his Scottish grandmother, who adored cowboy star Tom Mix and took him to the theater 2 or 3 times a week, sparking a lifelong passion for film because of Carl's work. The family moved frequently before settling in Princeton, Illinois, where Carl opened Henry's Bakery and the family lived in the apartment above it. Richard attended Princeton High School, stood out as a strong student, played football, and even became class president. But life took a difficult turn during his junior year when his parents separated. Ethel stayed in Princeton to raise her sons until they finished school. After graduating in 1932, Richard earned a scholarship to Lake Forest College, where he planned to study law. He continued playing football, placed 3rd in a statewide speech contest, and discovered a new passion: acting. At first he was shy, worried about what people might think, but his interest in theater grew. Everything changed when he met Aurora Jean Hazelwood, a fellow drama student who would become the love of his life. Richard graduated in 1936 and stayed at Lake Forest for 2 more years to help with drama and speech classes. In 1938, he took a leap of faith and moved to New York City after a friend offered him a job in radio. By coincidence, Jean Hazelwood was also studying in New York at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Soon Richard began landing radio drama roles, including parts in a Jenny's Real-Life Stories, racing from studio to studio and building his career. On April 5, 1942, just months after the United States entered World War II, Richard and Jean married in her hometown of Evanston, Illinois. He later said he never so much as looked at another woman after meeting her, once remarking, "I happen to like my wife a lot." Their marriage lasted 55 years without the scandals that often plagued Hollywood couples. When the war began, Richard tried to enlist but was rejected because of a perforated eardrum. His brother Donald, however, was drafted and sent to Europe. In 1943, tragedy struck when Donald's plane was shot down over the Netherlands. He was the only crew member to survive and spent over a year in a German prison camp. Although he eventually made it home, his health never recovered. Chronic headaches worsened, he became partially paralyzed in 1951, and he passed away from a brain tumor on December 22, 1955. At just 37, Richard cared deeply for him, and often said the government failed to understand the extent of Donald's suffering after the war. Meanwhile, Richard and Jean worried about Donald as Richard's own career began to take off. He made his Broadway debut in Kiss and Tell and joined the American Theater Wing, performing for American troops. By then, he was earning a solid income from stage and radio, building the foundation of a strong acting career. In 1945, the couple welcomed their only child, Anne Heath Widmark, born on July 25th, soon after. Richard received a career-changing offer from 20th Century Fox executive Daryl F. Zanuck, a chance to play the ruthless killer Tommy Udo in Kiss of Death alongside Victor Mature. Director Henry Hathaway wasn't convinced, thinking Richard looked too intelligent with that high forehead to play a cold-blooded murderer. Zanuck insisted, though, and Richard got the role. Hathaway reportedly made the shoot difficult, and Richard took the part mainly because it was being filmed in New York. Remarkably, this was his first movie, and in his very first scene he made an unforgettable entrance. As Tommy Udo, he shoved an elderly woman in a wheelchair down a staircase while delivering a chilling, maniacal laugh that became legendary. That single moment earned him an Academy Award. nomination for Best Supporting Actor, and a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. Richard later joked, "I thought this acting thing was easy. I haven't won anything since," and admitted that seeing himself on screen for the first time terrified him, saying he felt like shooting himself. Audiences were captivated by Richard Widmark's performance. They loved to hate Tommy Udo, and Fox quickly signed him to a 7-year contract. Even though his first deal had been far from ideal, by 1948, Widmark's career was gaining serious momentum. He appeared in Yellow Sky alongside Gregory Peck and in Baxter, then starred in Roadhouse with Celeste Holm and The Street with No Name with Lloyd Nolan and Barbara Lawrence. In 1949, he joined Lionel Barrymore in Down to the Sea in Ships, further establishing himself as one of Hollywood's most promising rising stars. By 1950, the studio trusted him with 2 major projects. The first was Panic in the Streets, directed by Elia Kazan, an old Broadway friend who had encouraged him to audition for Kiss of Death back in 1947. The film featured Jack Palance and Zero Mostel, but despite its strong cast, it struggled at the box office. Filming on location in New Orleans had been too expensive, and profits fell short. Next came No Way Out, a bold, racially charged drama co-starring Sidney Poitier and Linda Darnell. Widmark played the vicious racist Ray Biddle, a role he wanted to refuse but the studio insisted. Every day on set, after delivering his harshest lines, he would turn to Poitier and say, "Sid, you know this is just acting, right?" Poitier would smile and reply, "Dick, I get it. I'm an actor too." The two became genuine friends. And years later, Poitier revealed that Widmark was the first person in Hollywood to invite him to dinner. Simple gesture that meant more than words at the time, before Widmark's later career took shape. He appeared in one of his key early 1950s films. In 1951, he starred in Halls of Montezuma, a World War II drama set on a Japanese-held island. The cast included his old radio friend Carl Meldon, along with Jack Palance, Richard Boone, and a young Robert Wagner making his first credited film appearance. In 1952, Widmark shared the screen with Marilyn Monroe in Don't Bother to Knock. He later described Monroe as a fragile soul, like a wounded bird. She wanted fame, but was terrified of the pressure that came with it. Sometimes she would lock herself in her dressing room for hours while the crew waited anxiously. She struggled with her lines and her takes were unpredictable. But once the footage was edited, the final performance was magic proof of the luminous presence that made her unforgettable. Despite rumors of Monroe having flings with many of her co-stars, Widmark was clear, "Not with me." She didn't even flirt. In 1954, he worked again with Robert Wagner and Spencer Tracy in Broken Lance, which marked the end of his 7-year contract with 20th Century Fox. At 40, Widmark felt ready for change. He was exhausted from moving nonstop from film to film and believed he could earn more and choose better projects as an independent actor. His daughter said he was always a family man who preferred the quiet life on their ranch in the San Fernando Valley. Wanting more creative control, he founded his own production company, Heath Productions, named after Anne's middle name. But 1956 brought new heartbreak when his mother, Ethel May, passed away just a year after the death of his brother Donald. Widmark rarely criticized others in public, but within the industry, many whispered about the actors he simply couldn't stand. He had no patience for ego, laziness, or showmanship. Anything he felt disrespected the craft of acting. According to those close to him, there were 5 actors he especially disliked. First was Frank Sinatra. Though the public adored Sinatra, he didn't impress Widmark. While filming The Detective in 1968, he reportedly grew furious with Sinatra's laid-back attitude, arriving late, wanting scenes done quickly and avoiding proper rehearsal. It clashed entirely with Widmark's discipline and professionalism. One crew member recalled, "Richard felt Frank was all charm and no dedication." To Widmark, acting was something sacred. To Sinatra, it looked like just another job. Second on his list was Marlon Brando. Widmark respected Brando's raw brilliance but had little tolerance for his method acting extremes, his refusal to learn lines, constant improvising, and unpredictable moods. They never worked together, but Widmark was once heard saying, Some actors need chaos to create. I prefer focus, a remark widely believed to be aimed at Brando. Third was Tony Curtis, with whom Widmark worked on The Longships in 1964. Any chance at friendship disappeared quickly. Curtis was known for his vanity, spending more time in front of the mirror than studying the script. He treated the set like a runway, while Widmark arrived fully prepared to work. One crew member later said that Widmark didn't dislike Curtis for who he truly was, but for who he tried to be. To Widmark, Curtis was all polish and no depth. Fourth on the list was Robert Mitchum, cool, carefree, and often a bit buzzed. Mitchum embodied Hollywood's laid-back rebel spirit, but Widmark saw that attitude as borderline disrespectful. Mitchum openly joked about never preparing for roles, saying, "I just show up, hit my mark, and say the lines." For Widmark, who approached each role like a mission, this was infuriating. After watching Mitchum in a film, he muttered to a friend, "You don't coast your way to greatness." The fifth was Kirk Douglas, a name that surprised many. Widmark and Douglas both had fierce, intense screen personas, and perhaps that was exactly why they clashed. Widmark felt Douglas always had to be the center of attention, dominating scenes with his loud voice, sweeping gestures, and relentless need to control every moment. Rumor has it, Widmark once refused a major role alongside Douglas, saying there's only room for one storm in a scene, and Kirk brings the whole hurricane. Even so, Widmark never made a public spectacle of his dislikes. He wasn't one to gossip or stir up scandal, but those who knew him said he had strong beliefs about acting, believing an actor owed respect to the story, the audience, and his fellow performers. When someone ignored that responsibility, whether from ego or laziness, Widmark took it personally. By 1957, Widmark starred in Time Limit with Richard Basehart and June Lockhart. The next year, he appeared with Doris Day and Gig Young in The Tunnel of Love, and also worked with Robert Taylor and Patricia Owens in The Law and Jake Wade. By this point, he was more than just recognizable, he was a Hollywood fixture. When asked if fame had taken away his privacy, Widmark answered simply, "I don't care how famous an actor is. He can live a normal life if he wants to." In 1960, he played Jim Bowie in John Wayne's production of The Alamo. Wayne originally wanted him for Colonel William Travis, and even told him, "You're not big enough to play Jim Bowie." Widmark responded confidently, "I will be," and he proved it. The following year, 1961, he starred in the Western To Rode Together with James Stewart and Shirley Jones, further cementing his reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected leading men. Director John Ford and Stewart often argued on set, usually about Stewart's old, battered cowboy hat, the same one he had worn in earlier Westerns. Amid the tension, Shirley Jones later confessed that Richard Widmark was the only leading man she ever truly fell in love with. "He and Stewart were both so kind and protective of me," she recalled. "Nothing ever happened between us, but maybe that's exactly why I loved him." That same year, Widmark took on the role of the American prosecutor in Judgment at Nuremberg. Starring alongside Spencer Tracy and Burt Lancaster, in 1962 he joined an all-star cast: John Wayne, James Stewart, Gregory Peck, Debbie Reynolds, Carol Baker, and Henry Fonda in the epic How the West Was Won, with a massive $15 million budget. The film went on to earn more than $50 million for the studio by 1964. Widmark and his wife Jean were enjoying a peaceful life on their 20-acre estate in Connecticut. In 1966, he returned to the screen in Alvarez Kelly, Civil War drama with William Holden and Janice Rule. A year later came The Way West, co-starring Robert Mitchum and Kirk Douglas. But just 2 years after Alvarez Kelly, tragedy struck when Widmark's father, Carl, passed away in New Orleans at age 70 in 1974. Widmark appeared in Murder on the Orient Express alongside stars such as Lauren Bacall and many others. By 1982, he was back on screen in Hanky Panky, directed by his friend Sidney Poitier and co-starring Gene Wilder and Gilda Radner. By 1987, at age 72, Widmark admitted that filmmaking no longer thrilled him. "I've realized in my old age making movies just irritates me," he said. I only have a few years left, and I don't want to spend 12 hours on a set just to shoot 2 minutes of film. Over his career, he appeared in more than 70 films, many of them westerns. The roles that defined him that same year. In an interview with Portrayed magazine, he shared some strange fan encounters. Once a woman slapped him on the street and called him a little squirt, and on another occasion, a large man knocked him off his chair in a restaurant. Laughing, Widmark said, "This acting business is something else." When asked if he had been wise with money and like many stars who lost everything, he joked, "No, I'm just cheap." In February 1990, at age 75, he received one of his greatest honors, the D.W. Griffith Lifetime Achievement Award. His close friend Sidney Poitier presented it. "Sid, I can't believe you came all the way to California just for this," Widmark said. "For you, Dick, I would have walked," Poitier replied. But that same year brought heartbreak. His beloved wife Jean was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Widmark left acting to care for her full-time, returning only once more in 1991 for True Colors, solely to honor a commitment. The next 7 years were painfully difficult for Widmark and their daughter as they watched Jean slowly fade away. On March 2, 1997, Jean passed away in Santa Barbara, California. A few months later, Widmark sold their cherished 80-acre ranch in Hidden Valley. Without her, it no longer felt like home. 2.5 years later, on September 27, 1999, the 84-year-old Widmark married Susan Blanchard, a family friend who had always been kind to Jean. They settled in Roxbury, Connecticut. In 2002, Widmark was inducted into the National Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City, a proud moment in his later life. But by 2007, his health was failing, and a fractured vertebra made things worse. On March 24, 2008, at age 93, Richard Widmark passed away peacefully at his home in Roxbury. Friends remembered him as a gentle, honorable man.